Hi, I'm BJ, and this is the Arcane Alienist Podcast. Hey everybody, I want to give a summary today of the first game I played with a bunch of teenagers. I've played with kids before, so that in itself is not new. But we've got some calls to get to, but I'm going to save those for the end of the episode and just kind of get into the main topic today. So this is actually new. Been a couple weeks back. This was actually the 31st of December when we played. My son had some friends who wanted to play D&D. They'd kind of come over and hung out and saw all my D&D stuff on the shelf and were asking about it. And I think I mentioned before, it was a really large group. There were 10 of them, although only 8 of them showed up. And I said to myself, and to them, this is with a group that big, we can't do 5th edition D&D or stuff. It's too cumbersome with the that rule set. But, I've been itching to get back into some old school essentials or some BX or something like that. So, and with Knave, kind of blending in some ideas from Knave. And I'd done a brief kind of short game with my son and one of his friends, kind of playing around with some ideas several weeks before that. So we made characters for the game. Kind of did that through a group chat, and then sat down to play. And we played a good. I think we made it 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours. It was a really good session. We had 7 kids here, and then one of them kind of Zoom. I got in on FaceTime, and somebody held the phone because we actually got out some miniatures and did a little bit of stuff. When they actually started on a dungeon crawl, and it was a lot of fun. So the group, we have 3 dwarves in the group. I went ahead and went with the, even though I'm using mostly BX, I went in and used an Knave approach to creating characters, which is a classless system, but I actually added some class stuff back in there, as I've alluded to before, and also just kind of went with sort of the modern concept of no class restrictions. But I did limit it to the classic BX races or species. So we wound up with 3 dwarves. 2 of them are clerics. One of them is a wizard. We wound up with 2 elves, one a wizard and one rogue, but the player of the wizard elf wound up not being able to make it, so we just had the one elf in the party. We had 2 human rogues, and I gave them some abilities, some choices to, maybe I'll explain how I did this, to kind of not just have to be a thief type. They could be a thief type, but had a little more flexibility, and one wound up making more of kind of a, I wouldn't say bard because there's no spells or none of the sort of mystical abilities of a D&D bard, but they're sort of a street performer, not necessarily a criminal. But then the other one made a more of a kind of more what you would call a classic thief build, with the idea that he's actually kind of an assassin character. So we wound up with them 2, a human fighter, which is what my son decided to play, a human fighter. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Who was our 7th? Oh, there are 2 halflings in the group. A halfling fighter and a halfling magic user, and the halfling magic user player was the other one who couldn't show up. Or fighter. So we had a halfling magic user. So we got a couple magic users, a couple clerics, 3 rogues. Only wound up with the 1 fighter, which they learned kind of early on with some mistakes and tactics. Hey, maybe we need to sort of think about our strategy. That was the best part. When we ended, the kind of the big fight at the end where we ended the session. The first thing one of these kids said was, "We have really got to think about our strategy when we get into combat." And I thought, well, lesson learned from playing an old school style game. Like, you guys are not just going to cakewalk over the bad guys. Not much plot armor or anything like that. What had happened is they had the 2 dwarven clerics had to sort of help get into the front line of combat. which, clerics can do that, but not at first level. They don't have the best armor and the best hit points they've built up yet. You really should be letting fighters to do that. But we only had the one fighter. And so, we ended with both clerics kind of down, and not dead, but down, at 0 hit points. And are going to have to recover from that. So what I did was my plan for this group is to run in the shadows of Tower Silveraxe, which seems like a really great kind of basic module designed for old school essentials. You got sort of a town to kind of create a home base in as you kind of explore this area. There are several dungeons, but they're kind of small dungeons that you can go out and find and quickly resolve kind of probably in one setting. You can explore kind of this wilderness area, but it's not like you're getting into hex crawling where you got to go camp. Everything, is a day. You can make a day trip to any location and explore it. So that it kind of reminds me a little bit of what you can do with Keep on the Borderlands, where you can just continue to make forays into different dungeons. Unlike Keep on the Borderlands, they're not just all, the entrances aren't just all staring at each other. It's still spread. The dungeons are spread out over the map, and you got to find clues on where to find them. And a clue in one dungeon may lead you to search in another area. So it seems like a really well designed little. It sounds like a really developed module for basic characters. And with that big group, that's what I want to do. However, that's not where we started. When we were kind of making their characters, I kind of suggested that maybe the dwarves are from this area because the town that you can kind of base in is a dwarven town. But gave them a reason to journey to the city where we started, where they're supposed to pick up a glass lens, a large glass lens for the observatory, the wizard that lives down among the dwarves. That's what prompted them to be there. But and then I asked everybody else, maybe just give me a reason why they might be in this particular city. I alluded before, I've kind of created this city that's going to be my kind of version, kind of inspired by Lankmar. But I was going to run while they're there the Veiled Society, which is again it's an old basic module, but it's one that's very short. You can run it very quickly. In fact, if this had just been not them getting used to the rules and used to their pacing and things, we might have been able to finish it in one setting. We got about halfway, I think half to two-thirds of the way through it. It's not a long module. It's one that can run very quickly. It's kind of a murder mystery. But first you have to run them through a dungeon crawl where they uncover the murder before they can then proceed to doing the actual murder mystery part of it. So it's also a good introductory adventure in that it has a small dungeon for them to explore and kind of get some of those experiences down if you're a new player. So the players have to first come into the city gate. All of them are coming into the city except the human fighter who is said wanted to be a town guard and trying to set up the way the Veiled Society works. I said, hey, why don't, instead of being a city guard, why don't we say you're a house guard for one of the noble houses? So the city of Valasparta, which is I think I mentioned it in the previous podcast, it's sort of there are nobility that are officially in charge, but then there's all these guilds which really kind of run things because we're in this kind of late medieval period where you're shifting away to shifting more towards an economy where merchants can get a lot of wealth and guilds have a lot of power within a city and can wield considerable influence. So why don't we say you're a guard of one of the noble houses, and then I rolled them into the plot because that's sort of what happens in the Veiled Society. I'm trying to give too many spoilers if anybody wants to play it, but it is an old module. But a noblewoman winds up dead, and there's who's behind it, and there's nobles houses accusing one another of being behind it and stuff like that. So that kind of gives a way to ground him into one of the plot lines that runs through that module. So they explore it, but the first thing that happens is you get into town, you sort of set up that there's this religious festival going on. One of the houses is sponsoring the religious festival. They get into their processional gets held up by members of another one of their rival noble houses. There's kind of some violence in the streets. Just to kind of set that this is the backdrop of what's going on. So most of the players said, "Oh, we're here for the festival. It's a religious festival." And so, after that, they go to find an inn, stay for the night. And the big thing that kicks off the dungeon crawl is the next morning. This woman who lives near the inn, kind of elderly widow woman comes in. Oh, there's a monster in the basement. I can't go down to my root cellar. There's a monster down there. And that's where you kind of discover the entry to the small dungeon that has been dug underneath the city streets. So that was really cool. I mean, they did some things that I just went with it. I said, I'm not going to, unless they ask what's a good strategy here for us as newbies, I'm just going to let them make mistakes on their own with their characters. So they split the party into 3 groups to kind of explore this area. And I'm like, well, okay, if that's what you guys want to do. I found that was very, if you're falling back on some old school stuff of sort of tracking turns, that made that a lot easier to deal with, to say, okay, well, a turn has passed as this group has explored this area. What were you guys doing? Well, we can kind of figure out what you could accomplish in a turn in terms of movement and exploration, and then we'll go back to the third group. And it was really, they did very good. It was kind of like, maybe watching a movie or a TV show where the characters have split up into different scenes. It went very smoothly. Nobody got bored. I kept the pace going so that we were never in one location with one subset of characters for more than a couple of minutes. Eventually they kind of wandered around and wound up, getting back together as at the end. It ended with them, one discovering the body as part of the module, but then getting into a fight with some hobgoblins who had been, who had pressed some looked like they had just maybe kidnapped some homeless people or some peasants off the street that no one would miss, and were forcing them to sort of dig these tunnels, which is another part of the mystery to solve. Why is the Veiled Society digging these tunnels underneath the streets, and why is this dead person here? That'll be next part. That's where we ended. But good fight. They kind of learned to work together. One thing that was really interesting about this group of kids, they're all high school students. They're all, the way they're friends is they're all part of drama. They've been in plays together. They've done speech and debate together at school. So I didn't anticipate this, and it wasn't until after we finished and I was thinking about it. That was really a very good, that was one of the most easily run sessions I've had, which is amazing considering that it was 8 players and they were all kids. And then I realized, they did a very good job, and I'm attributing to this. I haven't asked any of them yet. The fact that they've all done stage productions together, no one seemed to have this sense of needing to hog the spotlight. They all paid attention to what the other person was doing. They sort of responded to each other, in kind of that improv thing you want to see in D&D. I think that just the fact that they all not only have worked in drama, but they worked together to put on productions, they kind of had that sense. Now, it wasn't this isn't a game and we don't care about the rules and we don't care about strategy. We're just going to kind of just do improv theater. I didn't get any of that. They were still very much interested. In fact, when how they got interested in D&D is they had all kind of come over to hang out a couple months ago, and we're playing Risk because we had Risk, and one of them loves Risk and said, "Hey, can we play Risk?" It's like, "Yeah, sure. Knock yourselves out." So they all got interested in playing Risk. So they also like board games. So I said, well, D&D is kind of like, it's got kind of the rule structure of a board game like Risk with some, open-ended storytelling elements, that you get in a role-playing game. So it really went well. So if you ever get a chance to run D&D for a group of actors, not Critical Role style professional voice actors, but of just people who are kind of used to doing that kind of stuff together, maybe you'll get the similar results. But anyway, really good. They all had a lot of fun. They're very anxious to come back. Of course, they're really busy with school and stuff, so I think we're going to play again here in a couple of weeks to play the second half of that and hopefully get them on the road to do the Shadow of Tower Silver Axe. The other thing that's come up since then is my son has another group of friends that are more just like his classmates. These are 3 other guys that are just kind of his close friends that he hangs out with through other activities and through being in class with them at school. They want to play D&D. So this coming Sunday, we're going to play D&D with them. And I thought, well, why don't we do? I've been kind of getting interested in sort of the open world, open table, multiple things going on at once idea. What fortuitous timing. Now I've got another group of kids, including my son, who's going to be part of that group. And I'm like, why don't we set this in the same world, just in somewhere off on another part of the map. You make a second character. They can make new characters, and we'll come up with something for them to do there. And then there's always the possibility that you guys might bump into each other or have a crossover, or you might want to get together. The two groups might want to get together at a big thing, or just in different subsets of them as these characters explore the world and maybe bump into each other and get to know each other. Or you might see signs of one another's passing, which is just kind of a neat little side effect of traversing the same map from throughout the game. We'll see. We'll see how many of them stick with the game. Who knows? A lot of people show up, play once or twice, and then bounce, right? But it's really kind of cool to see that possibly come about here in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. What I decided to do for them is I thought, well, let's go ahead and now keep track of time and the passage of time and the date on the calendar and things like that. And what possible module could I pull in? Because I still don't have time to write my own right now, and kind of adapt to do this. And it occurred to me that, well, another really good starting basic module is King's Harvest. I think that's B10. And I played around with some solo playing it before, just trying to learn some of the rules of basic procedural rules. I could run that for them. And the interesting thing is King's Harvest starts with a festival in a small town. Well, that could be the same holiday that the other group are currently encountering in the city. They're just encountering it in a small village somewhere else, somewhere else on the map. But that would be a good way to sync up the beginning is, okay, well, the campaign for both of you have begun with this religious holiday. It's just that one of you were in this sort of small farming community, and another group of you were over in town when it started. And that might, it just really kind of sinks in. Okay, there's the day that we started. We put it on the map. It's a harvest festival now. Now we have more of a solidified date in the calendar sometime in the fall. And now we can sort of start tracking the date and maybe get into, okay, well, now we can start tracking weather and when does it get cold and starting looking at effects of, when there's precipitation. Now it's not rain, it's snow, because we're getting into the winter as we go on. So yeah, I'm really kind of excited to pull out a lot of the old school methods of timekeeping and campaign management, and people maybe having more than one character. And one thing I decided on with the two dwarves, they're going to have to recover. They those hit points. They could bring them back with spells, obviously, but. What I sort of settled on was in the new edition of Knave that's coming out, second edition, and this does sort of make the characters a little more resilient, and Ben makes a point of that in his notes in describing this, is that you've got your hit points, and then you've got your inventory slots, which is based on your constitution. Well, what happens is when you lose your hit points, the damage now starts to hit your constitution. And when you lose a point of constitution, not only you're now taking serious injury, but your inventory slot, kind of representing that injury that you're now facing your inventory, you lose an item slot. You got to drop something and either leave it behind, or maybe you've got an ally has to pick it up and carry it for you. So, again, just the idea of, well, I'm low on hit points, but I've still got 12 constitution points to survive. Well, if you don't get out of there with any treasure, you're not going to get any XP. How are you going to carry all that treasure if you're down to 1 point of constitution? The other idea here is that what I'm going to do with that is that's a day of bed rest and under the care of a skilled healer to gain that constitution back. So yeah, go ahead and burn through 10 of your 12 constitution points. Your character is going to be out of commission for 10 days. So, we get a little more fast healing and keep people engaged through magic or hit point recovery. But those serious wounds to your constitution take a lot longer. And I don't think that was part of Knave First Edition, but I know that's how they kind of do it in Cairn, and I believe they do it that way in Into the Odd. So we've got some new school stuff to kind of put on top of old school essentials here. I'm kind of liking the way it's shaking out. So there's still some danger. There's still some strategy. You've got to manage your resources. And even if these characters are a little tougher than a typical BX or Old School Essentials character might be at first or second level, there are consequences for not trying to avoid danger. So that's how kind of how we're going to play it. The kids kind of didn't want the whole, life is cheap and we're all going to die approach. So I kind of explained that, that's kind of the way it works. Well, we don't want that. Okay, well, here's a way to make you a little more resilient. The second group, though, they might decide they want to play on hard mode where, I'll die 10 minutes in and have to roll up new characters. It's a different group of kids with a different kind of approach. I know my son wanted the old school, dead at 0 hit points and I just roll up a new character kind of thing. Maybe getting a little grimmer and darker in his approach. But all of his other friends, they kind of outvoted him. This other group may be up for it. We'll see. By the way, I'm really excited about kind of where this is going and how to play around a little bit with kind of two groups. Some of them with maybe people have a character in each group and they're kind of milling around in the same campaign world and how that affects, what they do and don't encounter and what does and doesn't happen. That sounds like, to me, it's going to be a lot of fun. Also, the really cool thing was this was my first time back at the real table running a group. I actually had not run much for the better part of a year, taking care of my parents and a lot of other stuff going on this past year. So this is really the first time I've sat down with a proper group of several people and run, not just run a game, but at the table, with miniatures and terrain and things like that. I got I was using flat acrylic miniatures. I've shifted to that as opposed to conventional 3-dimensional miniatures. It worked really well. Set up, they're really cheap. I kind of got a bulk of them a while back. I was even able to find really good ones to kind of represent all the player characters. So, if you guys haven't taken a look at those kinds of things, there are several companies that do it. Check it out. They're really good. The terrain I used when I had to set up, and I kind of did the dungeon craft approach where I'm not going to set up an entire dungeon's worth of terrain. It's when you move into the room, I'm going to lay out some minimal scatter terrain to kind of set the boundaries so you have a sense of perspective. And then when you move on to the next room, we'll just clear it. And if you're walking down a long hallway or corridor, we won't do that. We'll just describe that theater of the mind, right? But I got those from, I think it's called Monster Fight Club. Is that the name? I'll put a link. I don't have them in front of me while I'm recording this, but I'll put a link to the company. I think it's a really cool, fully painted, already pre-painted plastic terrain that makes really good scatter terrain with rocks and trees and bricks and stuff like that. I use a little bit of that, and then I use some WizKids dungeon dressing stuff as well, just to kind of, again, it's kind of like going back to theater. It's kind of like setting up just minimal props and backdrops to block out a scene on a stage, as opposed to the kind of, dwarven forge. You got the whole room and all the walls and all the tiles and all that stuff. And that worked really well also. So anyway, anybody has any thoughts on that? Any feedback, any questions? Give me a call, give me an email. Leave me a message. You can give me through SpeakPipe. You can drop me a voicemail through email, or a voice message through email, or through you can find me on the Audio Dungeon Discord. But that is where we're headed. So that's it. I kind of rambled on there a little bit. I will switch over now and let's get into these calls that have been waiting.
Hey, BJ, I couldn't find the SpeakPipe link on your podcast, so I'm just leaving you a voice message. Thank you for running Raccoon Sky Pirates. It was really fun. Hopefully people will get it and have lots of laughs like we did. And you can see those laughs on the actual play. Thank you for putting that link there. I know you had posted something. Maybe you can explain it. But the Raccoon Sky Pirates mega game for convention sounded really intriguing. So maybe it's something we can do. All right. Thanks again. Talk to you later, buddy.
So that was Carl Rodriguez of the GMologist Presents podcast and YouTube channel. So referring to our playing of Raccoon Sky Pirates, in the very last page is sort of the optional rules or expanded rules they give for other things you can do. It says this is something they have thought of, but to their knowledge, no one has actually done, and that is the mega game. That would be to set up 3 groups, because in Raccoon Sky Pirates, you have the original 6 raccoons, you have 6 possums, and then you have 6 other animals, 2 pigeons, 2 rats, and 2 cockroaches. The idea would be to set up 3 groups. I don't know, you could probably mix and match however you wanted, or you could do, raccoons versus possums versus everybody else. But because you've got 18 characters, set up 3 tables of 6 players with their own crew and their own flying airship, but use the same map. Now, they'd probably be at different tables and have their own copy of the map, but someone would have to coordinate it enough that they take turns, and every time they kind of take their turn, you check to see do they enter the same space, and if they so, maybe they can interact. They could be competing with one another, or they could be trying to just team up and get 3 different ships to the same place. That doesn't really say in the book one way or the other way to do that. That's just sort of my thought. But the idea is you would have 3 tables running the game, but they're all running the game in the same game using the same map, and they could interact, including it even suggests that sometimes even when there's complications or problems, if it ever indicates that one group should be causing a problem for the other, they don't have to be anywhere near each other on the map. Just make up a funny way that something that happened way over here is affecting the the Sky Pirates that are way over there. So I think that would be a lot of fun just to do if you could get a group of friends together to play. But that also struck me as something as might be fun to do at a convention if you had enough people sign up to play. Now, I think the book doesn't suggest doing that at a con. In fact, the rule book doesn't ever mention playing at cons or anything like that. But I think it's not something I'd want to do right off the gate. But if sort of you knew you had a lot of people wanting to play that game, maybe we should try it at a couple of the regional cons here in Oklahoma and Texas, just the basic game. And then if it seems like there's a lot of response and a lot of interest and people who are going to come back to the con next year and want to play again, maybe we could work up to something like that. That might be a lot of fun. That was my suggestion to you and Amy on Discord was, hey, look at this. I wonder, we talked about doing Raccoon Sky Pirates at a con. I wonder if at some point we could actually pull off the super mega version of the game with 3 tables of 18 players. So we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. But it sounds like a lot of fun. And here, I think, we got another call from Carl. Let's see what this one's about.
Hey, BJ. Carl calling. Reference to the Mythic World of Erd Revisited podcast. I don't know if that's the exact title. I have a couple things. First, I don't know. I tend to disagree with Jason. I think my experience is that sometimes, and maybe you agree with me somewhat because you did mention it, sometimes stuff or whatever happens at the table can be distracting and not make for a pleasant game. And sometimes, in contrast, on a VTT, it runs super smooth and it's a great game experience. I've had that multiple times on both types of platforms, whether live or whatever. And sometimes I feel kind of bored when it's just a Zoom call, honestly. And people are just rolling dice on the side. And there's not as much, really to me, there's not as much interaction with the game or on the table. But again, your mileage may vary. And I guess I don't see it as just a board game or a video game. I think I like it. I like it a lot. I like different platforms. They're fun to play. And usually the distraction I see is with the players. I mean, I know sometimes I mess up and I get a little frustrated, especially when I'm trying out a new platform. Like recently, I've been trying out Foundry, but we get into it. Well received. No negative comments. So pretty cool stuff, I think. And again, I guess it's just what your preference is and what you like. So there, or maybe the game experience you have with that particular platform. And I know it sucks that I think in a way technology can hinder someone's use of a particular platform. I know some people have problems with what rig they kind of have with Fantasy Grounds or others, or Foundry for that matter, because you have to set up your own server, and that's not, for someone technically challenged, that's not easy. Though there are services that can help you with that, which I have discovered, and with a lot of help and advice from people on various Discords. But I think, I don't know, I just try to not think of the distractions, put them, take a deep breath, do my yoga meditation or whatever, and make sure things are smooth. So about the other thing, I'm excited about your World of Erd. I do like the known world a lot, and I know you're going to change it a bit. I don't mind. I mean, I feel like there should be like a general player knowledge about the world, and maybe that's something that could be done in the context of a session 0. But I don't feel bad about it, or I don't not like it. I do love the exploration and the mystery, but maybe there should be like a base common knowledge. Although sometimes I know, like, for example, my Warhammer Fantasy game, all the players have played Old World and Tabletop for a long time, Warhammer Fantasy Battle, etc. And they know about Skaven, but the rest of the society doesn't really know about them. And I know it's funny because even, I guess that's the whole process. It's kind of like with Dro, the way they did it back in the old days. Everyone knew about Dro, but people didn't know about Dro. So it's a kind of a weird way to how to challenge to separate metagame from what your players know. But I think there should be a baseline knowledge of what characters know about the world, which I think is kind of cool. Although sometimes it's fun to totally reveal it. I like in our Eberron game, where people who are not familiar with Eberron just like, wow, okay, they're lightning rails and skyships. That's kind of cool. I didn't know about that. And then it adds to their imagination when they run and play in these games. So anyway, good stuff. I'll talk to you later.
Hey, Carl. Yeah, I think with VTTs, it really, there's a lot of stuff going on there. I think when a VTT works well for you, it's a good thing. It should not distract from the game. It should just facilitate the game, online in a way that, you couldn't have otherwise, because particularly if you're using maps and tokens to do, grid-based combat or things like that. I think you're right that it kind of depends on the given VTT, the proficiency of the people playing with that VTT, with whether the computer they're using has is sort of got the power to run that. And I would also add with the servers, like you have to do with Fantasy Grounds. Like I live, I live out on the edge of town in a small town. We don't have super powerful high band internet. We have it, but it's high speed internet technically by the definition of high speed internet, but it's not as powerful as I would get if I lived like in Oklahoma City, in town. And so there's also times where like I have freeze out moments or the things lock up, or I have trouble with virtual tabletops, and it's not my computer and it's not my proficiency with the virtual tabletop. It's literally the bandwidth that I have available to me. It's not at the moment is not allowing me to run. Either whether because I've tried that on Fantasy Grounds where your computer basically becomes a server and everybody's connected to you, or the option of using their servers in both ways. There are strengths and weaknesses, but sometimes it's just the bandwidth of your internet connection isn't enough to facilitate the type of stuff you need to really pull off a VTT session, which I think is one of the strengths of Roll20 is it's all web-based, even though I think you can get a lot more out of a couple of the other virtual tabletops. They have more features, or some of them are a little easier to use or a little more there. But that's kind of the cool thing about Roll20 is you just got to log on to a website as opposed to downloading a software and managing your own server and things like that. So I would just throw that out there too. So sometimes the problems is more the internet company that you're dealing with and your location and how much data you can push out and download with your bandwidth as you're in real time. So as far as the exploration, that's kind of the question, right? Is there's sort of a baseline character knowledge that your characters would have, and players may not have it, but you can just, if they encounter something and it's like, oh, by the way, you would know that the king of this particular region is this person. That's just common knowledge. Everybody knows that. Versus, is it common knowledge that the king has a illegitimate son that, lives in the sewers and runs the thieves guild, that kind of stuff. Or, that there are sort of magical or fantastical elements to the city. Maybe, the city guards that you see walking by are not living things. Maybe they're just animated suits of armor. They're constructs, but not very many people know that. They have their visors down, and there's a story about why they do that, and that's something that you would discover, a cool thing you might discover when you're first playing in the world. I'll have to write that down as an idea. That just came to me off the top of my head. So those are the kind of things that I'm kind of wondering about. How much do you share and how much you not share? Because I get ideas like that, and I'm like, ooh, I want to talk to people about that and see what they think and get feedback and shape that idea. But then I think, well, do I want to potentially spoil something for some of my friends who might then encounter that as they play in a game I run, right? Do I want to bounce those ideas off people who might then would have rather had the joy of discovering that as they play? And how do you do that, because, increasingly I don't think I have that many people where I can run those ideas who might not also wind up playing in that exact same scenario with me at some point. So that's kind of the question I'm still scratching my head about. But yeah, definitely there's a baseline of player knowledge that I think you have to assume people have, because it's just common knowledge for people in the setting. And whether you write that up and give it to, in a written form and give it to players, or whether you just kind of wait till you kind of encounter something and go, oh yeah, you would understand that. That's common knowledge. I think I tend to do the latter rather than wanting to give people homework. Or here's my 20 page write up of my campaign setting. You need to memorize all that if you want to play here, right? That's a little much. A little 1 or 2 page, 3 pages, maybe even gazetteer. Those are very helpful. I don't mind writing those up sometimes. So anyway, thank you for the calls, Carl. It's always good to hear your voice, and I'll talk to you later. Now let's see who we have up next.
Hey, BJ, Daniel Fans, keep calling in. Couple things. So I meant to call in about your video game episode, and I didn't, but since people are calling in, I will join the conversation. I think what you're saying is absolutely true. And while I agree with Jason on some level, I think that it really depends on your proficiency with the VTT. That is to say, I'm sure some people are so good with the VTT that it just doesn't get in the way. I do think it's a different play experience, and I've never played with anybody that's that good with the VTT, but I have to assume that some people are just very good. One thing I have noticed, although I'm not really playing 5e, but I watch a lot of YouTube videos and I read stuff and look around, it seems like a lot of 5e players, and I got this from going to conventions too and seeing it, use D&D Beyond. It's a major tool. So you get a lot of people that are making their characters using D&D Beyond and like a shared online experience there, even if they're playing in person. Like they'll literally bring their iPad or phone or whatever to the table. So that's interesting, right? We're getting that like hybridization, which I think is kind of interesting there. The other thing I wanted to say was the combat computer is awesome, Jason. I actually used that, printed that out, and used it when I was running AD&D several years back, and it works really well. So I do recommend it. What's nice about it is it has everything on one area, including the weapons versus armor if you're going to use that. And I mean, if you're playing AD&D, you got to use weapons versus armor, right? But finally, I'm calling it about your question, most importantly. So I guess I'm going to reframe it to give you my answer. If I was playing in the Star Wars universe as you described, and I was playing Luke Skywalker, I would not want to know that Darth Vader was Anakin Skywalker. If I was playing in a Star Wars universe and Darth Vader was just out there and Luke was just out there and there were NPCs that we might encounter, yeah, I wouldn't care because I could easily stay out of it. But me as a player, if the big bad evil guy is my father, right? I don't want to know that at the beginning. I want that to be a surprise, right? I want that to be an epic reveal. The same would be true for Peter Parker. If I was playing in the Marvel Universe and I was another superhero and it wasn't really, I was one of the X-Men or something, yeah, I wouldn't really care. But if we were playing like all the characters in the Marvel Universe and I was Aunt May or Mary Jane, I think I would definitely be Mary Jane. Although Aunt May is pretty cool too. Anyways, I wouldn't want to know. Like there, I wouldn't want to know because it would just, me as a player, I wouldn't enjoy it as much. Could I do it? Yeah, of course. I could totally pretend like I don't know, just like when we're DMs and we play NPCs that know everything and we don't reveal anything, right? It's easy enough to do, but for me as a player, it's not as rewarding. So I wouldn't want to know if that was the case. So that's the framing on it. So if it's something that's out in the world, I don't care. It's not directly related to my character's own personal story. It's more like an overall thing. It probably wouldn't be something I'd care to find out about. Like it wouldn't matter to me either way. If it's part of my character's personal story, I don't think I'd really want to know that. For me, that would probably take away. It wouldn't, make me not play the game, but it definitely wouldn't be my preference. So hopefully that makes sense. Also, I meant to call in last month, November. A lot of great episodes there. The one episode you did with all the various games, the games of chance and stuff sounded super cool. And I definitely want to dig into that deeper because those seemed very, very cool. So anyways, Happy New Year. Thanks for all the great stuff you put out there. And I'll talk to you later.
So that was Daniel Norton of Bandits Keep. Also, YouTube channels and podcast and other stuff. Daniel, I think it's kind of funny. I should have listened to your call before I responded to Carl's call because you're kind of echoing some of what I said there about it's probably a little to do with a person's own proficiency with the VTT. Probably has a major impact on that. D&D and Beyond, I that's what I have used a lot for my 5th edition characters. I was just about to cancel my subscription when they kind of walked back the OGL stuff, and so I kind of I'd already kind of paid for it, and I had paid for a year of it, and so I wasn't they weren't gonna lose any money by me canceling that, so I held on to it for a little while longer, but it is very convenient. I think if you're using it as a digital character sheet where you can just manage your character, say on your phone or on your computer, you can still bring that to the table, and it's really just a digital character sheet. But it is very convenient, and it makes it a lot easier to make a character very quickly and to level a character up very quickly than doing it with paper and pencil and flipping and turning and all that kind of stuff in the books. So I suspect we will see more of that in the future, where as app development gets a little better, where particularly now that we've sort of Wizards of the Coast maybe kind of shot itself in the foot, and where several people who at one point were just primarily making content for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons are now kind of Matt Mercer, Matt Colville, Cobalt Press. They're all doing their own games now to compete with 5e. I hope that with all of those, it would be neat if at least the ones who are kind of having bigger projects, who have more resources, would maybe develop an app of some kind that lets you build and manage your characters for their game system. That'd be really cool. Can't believe Paizo hasn't already done it, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them do it because it is just very, very convenient, particularly with modern games where there's a lot more that goes into character creation and character management than you can kind of write on an index card like you can in OD&D or BXD&D, right? And with the secrets, I think, from a character perspective, we certainly don't want to, we certainly want surprises and things related to your character's personal experience and personal connections to the world. We wouldn't want to spoil that or ruin any of that. So I think that's a good point you make there about both Star Wars and Spider-Man. Oh, that gives me an idea for a game. There's a game, is it Secret Werewolf? It's the game where somebody's a werewolf and you don't know you don't know they have to play kind of a normal character, but they're also the werewolf. I wonder if there's somewhere out there. There's maybe someone smarter than me can figure this out. A way to do a superhero game where nobody's playing the superhero. You're just a group of friends. Somebody's actually a superhero, and things happen, and then part of the game is figuring out who among you is actually the superhero. That might be kind of a fun game. Anyway, there's another kind of brain fart I've had listening to calls from everybody. Anyway, Daniel, thank you so much for the call. Everybody make sure and check out his stuff, and we'll go on to the next person.
Hey, BJ, the mythic world of Erd is back. That gets me super pumped, man. I remember back when you first started, when that's what got me hooked on your show. I loved hearing about it. I still love hearing about it. So selfishly, I want you to talk about all of it on your show. But as a player, ultimately, personally, I don't really care, though I guess my preference would be to figure it out during play, just as long as there is a way to figure it out during play. Because I hear one of the criticisms I hear a bunch, especially like on a bunch of Call of Cthulhu adventures that Seth Skorkowski has talked about, is there'll be this cool backstory for the adventure, but there's no way for the players to ever figure that out, or the characters to ever be able to figure that out. So yeah, man, like that's right. That's what we got to do, is make sure when we have cool stuff like that, that there's ways for the players to be like, oh shit, that is awesome. Oh, sorry. Beep that out. Anyway, man, awesome stuff. Take it easy. Peace out. Yo, BJ. So I totally meant to call in about this the first time you talked about Hasbro with the new VTT and the terrain, and like Jason mentioned, they're trying to kind of make it like tabletop simulator in the VTT, and you were talking about how you don't think they're going to try and go like full animated digital, maybe even virtual reality at some point. And I would say that they might not be trying to do that right now, but the technology is the worst it's ever going to be. It's only going to get better and let them do more things. So yeah, man, I would say down the line, probably not in the too distant far future, I could see Hasbro totally going away from physical products and going strictly like, hey, check out our amazing virtual Dungeons and Dragons world. And if they did it right, it would probably be pretty awesome, man. I would, I'm not gonna lie, that could be amazing. Like a fully interactive virtual Dungeons and Dragons game where you can do anything you want. Woo! I don't even know if it's, I mean, maybe, though. That's what I say. Like, the technology now is the worst it's ever going to be. It's just going to get better. So yeah, it's crazy. Anyway, I am rambling right now. I've been up since like 4 o'clock in the morning. It's now late at night. I'm going to go. Goodbye. Peace out.
All right. So there were a couple of calls from Joe Richter, the Hindsightless podcast. Yeah, Joe, yeah, I could totally agree with you. The plan now is for them to just sort of simulate miniatures and train on the VTT. But yeah, I think the more they can get into a virtual reality experience and be a little more immersive and animated, that'll come at some point. And it would be cool. I think that just in and of itself is kind of a cool. It may not be for everybody, but I'd certainly be interested in trying it out. I would hope that that's something that we get multiple people doing and we have multiple options, and it's not something that a company like Hasbro can develop and find a weasel their way into preventing anybody else from doing the same thing. Can't trust those big corporations, man. I think you're right. You've said it before. we're kind of in the cyberpunk era. Only we just don't get to have the cool augments, to our, we don't get our bionic arms and our, bionic eyes yet. Although that might be coming pretty soon as well. Who knows? Who knows what the future holds, man? But thank you for the call. And as far as knowledge, yeah, I think, yeah, I hear you there. It's part of the fun of listening to people's podcasts or looking at their blogs and hearing about their homebrew and the ideas they come up with. So when you just want to hear that to kind of hear the cool ideas, yeah, of course you want the spoilers, and then you got to think, but as a player, do I want to know that? And I think kind of with what you're talking about, and maybe a little bit what Daniel had mentioned before, yeah, what I was thinking about was sort of not revealing, being able to be surprised kind of on the small scale with characters you meet that you didn't know existed, or the discovering connections, to places and locations and people kind of on the small scale. I was kind of wondering about, if there's some sort of cool bit of lore about a location. Do you care to? Is it okay for you as a player to know that, even if your character might not know that, just because that's one of the things that kind of makes the world kind of cool? Or do you feel like that's also something you don't want to know? Because when we look at, like, again, it's why I mentioned playing role-playing games set in established worlds. We want to play in that game because we love. We want to play a Marvel game because we like Marvel comics. We want to play Middle-earth role-playing or some other version of a role-playing game set in Middle-earth because we enjoyed The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. But that means we know things about the world that our characters might not. When you go into a DM's homebrew world, there's a bunch of that stuff you can't have known because there's no novel, there's no comic book, there's no movie to reference, to kind of have to go, okay, I got to put that out of my head because my character doesn't know that. You literally don't know that unless the DM tells you those things. And that's kind of the thing I'm wondering about is, like, how much do I want to talk about that stuff, which I know a lot of people who listen to the podcast enjoy, versus some of you guys who occasionally I play with. You're kind of getting some spoilers for the setting you might have rather, discovered organically as a player at some point. So anyway, that's what I'm getting at. I got one idea that I'm really itching to share, so I'm going to go ahead and share it for you, Joe. And I hope everybody makes it to the whole podcast episode because we're getting to the end here. And that is simply this, but not simply this. It's going to take me a minute to explain. The idea I have is, and there are two things that made me think of this. In Michael Moorcock's, in the Elric saga, there's a point at which Elric encounters this sorceress who kind of lives at the edge of the world. And what happens is she lives in this kind of castle, kind of near the edge of the world, and there's a sort of a frontier or kind of a wilderness or an unsettled, place just kind of out beyond. And some guy will show up and she'll kind of enchant them, and they'll fall in love, and he'll become her champion, and he'll go forth out to the edge of the world and sort of conquer what's left in her name till he gets to the very end, and then build a new castle. And then she'll come to live with him in the castle. And, of course, she's immortal. The guy grows old. He dies. He passes away. And the cycle repeats itself. Now you've got this castle on the edge of the world, but this sort of the edge of the world creeps out a little farther, where there's some unsettled, untamed land, some places to explore and conquer. And another young man comes by and falls in love and goes forth in her name to prove his love by establishing this expanding domain. They build a new castle. And so what happens is, by the time Elric comes along, there's this series of ruined castles so far apart. The first one is just like some rubble. You might not even think, oh, that's the ruins of a castle. It's been so long. And the next one, you're like, oh, that looks like maybe there was something that used to be a structure there. And eventually, if you go up far enough, you'll find a castle kind of near the edge of the world, looking off the edge of the world. So there was that. And then there's also, several years ago, Marvel did the World War Hulk, where Hulk comes back from after the Avengers or the Illuminati tried to exile him. He comes back, he's angry, and he kind of wages war on the superheroes of Earth and Marvel, and it's a big event. But some of the heroes who have been friends of the Hulk and always understood kind of what he struggles with try to kind of rally around to settle things down and to try to steer him away and give him a chance to kind of settle down and talk him out of it. But one of the characters that does that is Hercules. If you know, in the Marvel universe, Hercules is kind of the meathead of superheroes. He's just like dude bro, jock to the max. But he winds up sort of taking in this kid who's kind of been trying to help the Hulk. Amadeus chose like this really smart kid who doesn't really have, a father, doesn't really have any, a lot of family. So after they end World War Hulk, this is a long way to explain this. They do this series. Well, the reason I explain is because you read this series. It's called The Incredible Hercules, and it sort of replaced The Incredible Hulk for a while. It's one of the best written. It's very funny. It's mostly kind of an action comedy approach to these, but it's just very well written. So if you can get your hands on The Incredible Hercules, it's great. But they sort of explore Hercules and the Greek god's role in the Marvel universe, and they explain that the ancient world concept of the axis mundi, the center of the world, but that it moves, that it shifts, and at one point it was Athens. And then it was Rome, and it's shifted over time, and it's sort of based on how humans have changed the world. They eventually wind up moving the metaphysical center of the world, not the actual axis that the Earth spins on. And right now it's New York City, because that's just sort of it's one of the biggest cities in the world, and it's the center of commerce and politics, and kind of everything goes and relates to New York. So New York is now the current axis mundi. It's not the gravitational or magnetic or physical center of the Earth, but it is this focal point of sort of mythic, metaphysical, things like that. So it just occurred to me to pair those ideas that there is a city in the mythic world of Erd that's at the center of the world. It is at the geographic center of the world. Erd is not a round planet. It is a flat world that is based on the sort of the ancient Near East concept of a world underneath the sky dome, and then the underworld, is the space, and there's pillars holding up the overworld, and the underworld is down there, and that's the domain of the dead. And these are physical locations, not different dimensions or different planes of existence, right? So, for the average person who lives in a world like that, there's a city at the center of the world. Why is it at the center of the world? Well, why wouldn't there be a city at the center of the world? It's the middle of the world, right? What they don't know is over the course of eons, as time passes, the center of the world changes just the way the axis mundi changes in Marvel Comics. And as one civilization or one power wanes and a new one rises, that becomes the metaphysical center of the world, but then the edges of the world expand in one direction and fade in another, because we're talking about kind of a flat Earth. So that as the place becomes the axis mundi, or the metaphysical center of the world, pretty soon the world itself shifts in very subtle and slow ways, so that now it's the geographical center of the world. But most people don't. It happens over so much time and so subtly, nobody questions it. Well, there's that old city over there. They used to claim they were the center of the world, but hey, man, we've measured it. The sages have taken measurements. They've looked through their observatories. The wizards have cast spells. We can prove without a shadow of a doubt that this city is the geographical center of the world. And why would you question that? And then, 1,000 years from now, the people in the new center of the world are going to say the same thing. Oh, the people back then, they were arrogant. They thought their civilization would last forever. They were foolish. Of course, they would have claimed that they were the center of the world, but they're not. We live in the center of the world. Look, we can prove it mathematically. We can prove it through observations. We can prove it through divination magic. This is the center of the world. I just thought that was kind of an interesting idea. It's something that no one character would ever know, but it's something they might encounter some crackpot, sage or wizard that everybody thinks is crazy or thinks is some kind of conspiracy theorist, or maybe even a heretic, kind of like Galileo claiming that the Earth isn't the center of the universe, when he's saying, no, this city used to be the center of the world. Now this place is the center of the world, and it won't always be the center of the world because this thing keeps happening, and I can show you how. I have the data, I have the proof, and everybody's like, heretic, throw him in irons, burn him at the stake. Anyway, that was the idea. So I don't know how I would ever work that into an adventure. It certainly just seemed more like a kind of a funny thing to encounter and then go on about with whatever else your actual adventure is. Although I guess, busting that guy out of jail or carting him off or something like that could turn into a city-based adventure. Anyway, well, there, I've spoiled it. I'll try not to spoil too much of that stuff for everybody, but that was the idea. So, but yeah, I decided, Joe, just for you, I would go ahead and share that. I would. You changed my mind. That seemed like too much fun to not discuss. All right, that is it for my response to Joe. Look, we got one more call. I believe it is from Jason, but let's see.
Hey, BJ, Jason here, answering your question about knowing secret knowledge of the world. If I have a choice, I would rather not know it. I would rather, as a player, not know the secret knowledge and have it revealed to me during play. I think that's not only more fun, because now we're unveiling mysteries during the game, it's also easier to play. I'm not having to do the, I, the player, know fire hurts trolls, but my character doesn't, so I need to play stupid. There's none of those silly games going on because I really don't know. So, to answer your question, I personally would prefer not to know.
Well, Jason, whatever you do, don't listen to that segment where I answered Joe's questions just before this one. All right, well, sorry. There's one spoiler that if you ever are playing in one of my games, you'll just have to put out of your head. Sorry, man. I'll try to keep that to the minimum. But no, I do appreciate your point, and that's exactly why I raised the question of where do you draw that line between things you want to tell players or potential players about your world to let them show them kind of what it's like and get them kind of interested versus what do you let them uncover naturally as they play the game, which is really kind of the fun part, right? So, okay, Jason, I'll try to keep that kind of stuff to a minimum from here on out. Thank you for the feedback. Everybody, that was Jason Connerly of the Nerds RPG Variety Cast. I would also like to give a shout out to Merc the Meek, who has a recent podcast that he started. He did actually wanted to call in about this topic, but he was recently has kind of suffered. His house has been kind of hit with some illness, and his voice was scratchy, so he couldn't wasn't up to calling in. But he did send me a message on voicemail, said I'm not feeling well enough to call in, but I want to let you know I'm looking forward to hearing how the Erd game goes. To answer your question, if I was a player, I'd love to learn in game what the secrets are instead of knowing them ahead of time and playing along. That's one of the ways that makes homebrew games so fun. But as a podcast listener, I'd also like to know the secrets as well. So yeah, I think kind of echoing what Joe had said, wanting to explore as a player, but as you're listening as a podcast fan and maybe not being a player, you kind of want to hear the stuff just because to get an idea about the world is like. So the struggle continues to try to balance those two things. Well, this episode is about twice as long as I wanted it to be, but I had a lot of calls to catch up, a lot of discussion. So I will end it here. Thank you for listening. Wherever you are out there, whatever you're doing, take care of yourself and try to make someone happy today. Talk to you later. Thanks for listening to the Arcane Alienist podcast. The music you're hearing is Come and Get It by Scott Holmes Music. The cover art is by Dave Bone. Be sure to check out his stuff at ironseer.com. You can leave me a message. I have my SpeakPipe account linked to the show description. You can also send me an email at arcane.alienist@gmail.com. Just embed a voice memo, or I'll just read the text to your email during a future episode. Once again, thanks so much for listening.